Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joined us. Media Center of Ukraine, Ukrinform, continues its operation. It's day 254 of our fight for freedom. And now we will be talking about how did the publishing market change and publishing industry change during the full-scale invasion. I want to introduce our guest, Oleksandr Krasovytskyi, director of the Folio publishing house. Mr. Oleksandr, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Can you please tell us about the changes which have taken place in this area and how did the demand of our population changed? Let's make a small excursion back into what was happening before the full-scale invasion. It's in 2013, Russian publishing houses own about 80% of Ukrainian market. All the Ukrainian publishers sell about 1/5 of what's in the free market, and they have small government contracts in libraries and study books. In 2017, the law was implemented which prohibited the import of anti-Ukrainian production, and other regulations were adopted, and that was the moment, maybe the best moment for the whole time of the independence, when Russian books were not important. So Ukrainian market made it, then licensing was implemented, and as of the end of 2019, 35,000 books were licensed, and now Ukraine issues about 4,000 of licensed literature per year. Out of them, in this way, Russian books return to Ukrainian market in terms of origin, not the language. In the winter 21-22, when e-support was implemented, it changed significantly the situation in the Ukrainian market. It supported the authors and publishers and readers as well. Unfortunately, the fraction of sale through e-support was at least it was 50% of Russian books. We got caravans of them imported. They were cheap, and it was hard for Ukrainian publishers to maintain the price competition. In winter 2022, the publishing activity stopped. Maybe in the summer, the book market resumed its operation in the right bank part of Ukraine, and as of today, it works even in such places which are close to the front line, such cities as Kharkiv or Mykolaiv, and Ukrainian readers actually supported the Ukrainian publishing industry with their money. Government did not take part in this. In June, legislation was adopted which restricts the printing and import of Russian books, and it's not, however, it was not signed by the president, because there are huge reserves of Russian and Belarusian books imported in Ukraine in winter, and they are still pretty powerful in the market. It gives the opportunity to Ukrainian pirates, and the criminality has no nationality actually, and the pirates steal a lot of books from Russian publishers and print them here, including those issued in Russia during the time of war. As of today, around 15-20% of the market in the internet is shadow market. I mean, of the paper books, it's a shadow market of the books published here by Russian publishing houses. And the white market, I think, is about 40-45% compared to the pre-war time. I think it's very good, taking into account the number of the readers readers with money who left for abroad, and the delivery of Ukrainian books is pretty costly. Another part is libraries. I will tell you a few figures. As of the end of 2022, after studying the demand in the library of Yaroslav Mudry, the libraries in the territories controlled by Ukrainian government as of the end of the last year had about 145 million books. Out of them, 75 million were the books in Ukrainian language and 65 million mostly in Russian language. Some minor fraction are in different Crimean Tatar languages, Bulgarian, English, German, but they don't really impact the total number. Out of the books available, more than 50% are the books issued during the Soviet time, both in Russian and Ukrainian language, the majority in Russian. In my opinion, the substantial part of these books is just waste that the libraries maintain. I'm talking about the public libraries, not school libraries and higher educational institution libraries. Thus, those are the books which don't enjoy any demand among the readers, and we spend a lot of funds for maintaining these books in terms of heating, storage, and so on. Ukraine is a comparatively poor country, but our network of libraries is more developed than in France or Italy or Great Britain. Under modern conditions, when the modern logistic chains operate, it would be a lot better to spend funds for the new storages and to change the books for those that have demand among the readers. For example, we can establish one library per community, and we can establish some mobile libraries and a number of and we can maintain a number of libraries in big cities which are being sponsored by community or municipal funds. So it's better to make one high quality library with modern employees, with modern logistics, with a broadband internet. Well, unfortunately, unlike medical system, for example, the system of culture did not get any market changes within the last 30 years. We are being pushed to these changes by current situation. First of all, there is ideological component, and we don't have a lot of money, and I don't think it's necessary to issue to the readers the books with a pre-word made by Russians and in the spirit of Marxism-Leninism. So there are 20% of the books that got to the libraries from Russian federations, which glorify Russian law enforcement agencies, Russian army, Russian sovereignty, Russian history. And maybe it's one of the reasons why we lost part of the population as Ukrainians in the occupied territories who consciously support the occupants. This is the ideological component that goes in part through libraries. When Kharkiv region was liberated, in the middle of September, I visited Izum and Shevchenkova, and after the hot races, just as Ukrainian army entered there, and I didn't like what I've seen. In Izum, in the center of the city, there are 2 district libraries with broken windows, broken doors, and all the equipment stolen from the facilities. Those are the children's library and adult library. No single book in the adult library, and in children's library there were 2 shelves with with some Russian language waste. In Shevchenkova, I was in the library in the center of the city. I had trouble getting I had trouble getting in there only when the municipal authorities broke the door in there. So the modern Ukrainian literature and history didn't have any books in there. We found the copybooks with the handwritten procedures of disposal of those books. However, in those libraries, freshly printed Russian newspapers were present. For example, Kharkiv Z, with the main article with the headline "We came here forever." In Izum, I found something in the school, in the local school authority, what the locals thought called is just the humanitarian aid. Different copybooks with Russian symbols and some table games, board games, saying, "Do you know Russia?" And it was at the moment where everything was liberated, and it was a municipal administration, and all those things were in huge amounts, and no one was impressed by that. In Shevchenko, where I found about a ton of study books with Russian language, social sciences brought from Russia, the history of Russia, history of the world in Russian language. For example, for 11th grade history study book, I've heard an interesting article about Russia joining Crimea, and it's serious. We have to have policy in place with regard to the occupation of the territories in terms of humanitarian policy. We turned out to be not ready to accept those challenges and to work with population in general. Thank you. Mr. Oleksandr, you mentioned black market where the Russian books are still being sold. What about the white market of our bookstores? Do we have bookstores selling Russian books? Oh yes, obviously. The majority of the bookstores, including in Kiev, they work with Russian books. As to the province, they sell not only white products, but in the bookstores, for example, in Chernivtsi, in the central street, there are pirate books being sold from Russian language, which were stolen by pirates in the internet. That does the signing of this law is the signing of this law going to restrict this? Yes, it will restrict the import from Belarus and Russia, and any import from Russia or in Russian language will require additional licensing. So any book printed in Russian language under other technical conditions for Kazakhstan or Latvia should be licensed, and no one would be able to issue it. Mr. Oleksandr, did demand for the books changed by Ukrainian in Ukrainian society? Do you feel any trend? Yes, it changed a lot. The part of historic literature in both fiction and non-fiction and science books grew significantly. Ukrainians want to know more about their history and history of the world. Second, the part of the children's literature fell dramatically because it's understood a large number of kids were evacuated abroad. And as to the language, the number of books being bought in Ukrainian language increased drastically, even by the Ukrainian authors. And this trend, I'm sure, is irreversible because many of the Russian-speaking Ukrainians switched to Ukrainian language, and they support their Ukrainian language with the books as well. As to your publishing house, what do you change? What do you issue now mostly? Well, as to my publishing house, even before the full-scale invasion, a large number of the books were devoted to the events happening in the East and in Crimea, so we increased this niche and we issue more books about what's happening now. But regarding the rest, I think it's necessary to the maximum extent to work in the regimen which is customary to the publishing house, so everybody around this industry sees that we keep the situation under control. For example, I can tell you that our printing house is in Derhachi, Kharkiv region. It's almost near the border with Russia. That territory was occupied. Then they destroyed the substation. There is no power and we cannot operate there, so we work in other printing houses, but now we don't show, we don't publish the information about the places where we print the books, because in Kharkiv it was, for example, destroyed by S-300 rockets. The logistics is now complicated. Our office doesn't work. The building of the office is not destroyed. We kept some equipment, but it was still targeted by Russian weapons. No one can work there. Still, the employees of the publishing house keep working through their personal computers. Did the demand for our books increase abroad? Well, let me finish the previous subject. We already returned to the amount of sales of the pre-war times. We still remember some market trends and the prices, and still in terms of volumes we are at the level of the last year. As to the interest to Ukraine and in Ukrainian books, well, the world market is very slow. Big publishing houses, they plan, they make publishing plans for 2024, not 2023. Yes, certain number of Ukrainian books are being translated by foreign publishing houses, but it's very small number. The exhibition in Frankfurt, it showed that everybody is on their own. Some of the publishing houses may support Ukraine, but they live in their hot tubs, and they're interested, for example, in the price of paper growing dramatically. Not only because of the Russian aggression, there is a deficit of paper. And maybe last thing is situation in Ukraine. For Ukrainian books to be translated, so we enter into the international system of sale of rights, of copyright, which is very active in Russia, for example, but it's almost non-existent in Ukraine. And not all the publishers, they have a moral restriction for Russian products. Russia keeps maintaining with their money the translations into different languages. This market keeps operating, and no moral restrictions work when big monies are offered. That's why the state doesn't have a lot of funds now. This program only started working in 2019, the program of support of the translation into foreign languages, and there is a 3-year budget planning, and foreign publishers will not sell Ukrainian books with their 3 years planning. For example, I only sold rights to one book lately. What was the books? It was the Chronicles of the War, with the daily chronicles and addresses of the Ukrainian president. It was sold for the translation into Romanian language. Dear colleagues, your questions, Irina Udodenko, Ukrinform. First question is, what are the book projects or programs for the military, and what do military read now? In Ukraine there are no state programs for the book programs for the military. There are a few publishers who support army with their books, mostly Nash format, our format, who issue the military literature for charity. Each publisher decides how to help the army in their own way. For example, we send the books with those to those with whom we communicate, and they publish some videos in internet, like the Ukrainian soldier reads most of all the military in the world. We send books to the military hospitals because it's very important to have books there. I can tell you, it may sound not quite actual, but many of the military wants to have books in Russian language, Ukrainian books about the war, but in Russian language. And such books exist too, and currently the book market restructured itself in the direction of Ukrainian literature, but my personal opinion, we should not restrict the issue of Russian authors who live and write in Ukraine, who are Ukrainian patriots, who enjoy demand of the also in Russian language, but we have to make copies in Ukrainian language too. And another question which follows is, what's the situation with the Russian authors? I understand that there is more interest to the Ukrainian speaking writers. What about the Russian speaking? Look, in the world there was no history, in the world history there were no writers who switched their languages. As to non-fiction, those authors who were writing in Russian language, they switched to Ukrainian. The fiction literature, I'm sure that it's such a complicated task that not everybody can cope with. So it's more question to the publishers, not to the authors, to take this political resolution, either to translate something in the text or to lose a part of their readers, or translate it into Ukrainian and keep both copies, both in Russian and Ukrainian. However, it's not quite easy in terms of economics, so it's paused now. Many Ukrainian writers didn't make it writing big works in this condition, and it's normal situation for the books market. I will expand your question. Okay, what's next after the war? Always after the war, in the whole world, many new people come to the book market, to the literature market, and Ukraine is no exclusion. We will have more Ukrainian writers. Our market will grow. It will be more powerful after the victory, after the war. But if we're talking about the big military novel which will emerge, we need 4, 5, 6 years to rethink it, because all the military novels appeared after 5, 7, 10 years after the war. We can say it about Remark, Ferdinando Selina, and Soviet writers. For example, Viktor Nekrasov wrote In the Trenches of Stalingrad in 1943. I'm sure you follow the dynamics of the authors that you provide both in Russian and Ukrainian language. What are you seeing? We didn't publish anything in parallel during the war. I'll tell you what was happening before the war. For example, Andrei Kurkov's books, which were issued 10 years ago, both in Ukrainian and Russian, they were bought approximately 6-1 in Russian. Before the war, they were bought 4-1, mostly in Ukrainian. As of statistics of 2021, the books of Mikhailo Bulgakov, Master and Margarita, it's 9-1, and Ukrainian translation was bought 9 times more frequently than Russian. There were other issues in Russian by other different publishers. There were 37 copies of the books of this novel imported to Ukraine from 37 different Russian publishers, but all the books included into the school program are being read mostly by the youth. The youth reads in Ukrainian. And that's marvelous. I want to thank you, Mr. Oleksandr, for this comprehensive monologue. Dear colleagues, our next briefing is at 13:30. We will talk with Mykola Pоворoznik about the situation in the capital. Bear with us. Thank you for this meeting, and let's believe in our armed forces and continue working for our victory. Glory to Ukraine.
Книжечка художня, написав на початку